Okay, welcome everybody to another beautiful Friday in Northwest Colorado. We're going to get started with our call. We've reached the 8-week mark for crisis response. Many of you have been actively involved with that, so I'm sure you feel similarly that we can't keep going at this pace for much longer. And yet, unfortunately, we're still facing a lot of unknowns. And so for a variety of reasons, partially because we're now in this phased reopening, and also because we can only sustain this pace for so long, we're going to shift these calls and many of our conversations to look at what's next and to really try to help equip business owners and community leaders with tools that can be looking into the future about how they can be pivoting their business or redirecting their efforts in order to be successful and sustainable for the long term. So with that, we'll kick off our call. Next slide, please. I'd like to say a quick thank you to our partners for this call, most importantly, Startup Colorado, the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, and Pacific Canopy, who are helping us behind the scenes with the tech operations for these phone calls. They would not be what they are without all of their support, so thank you. Next slide. Today's agenda, we're going to kick off with a legislative update on some proposed legislation out of Senator Bennett's office. So we'll have an introduction to that legislation, as well as their request for feedback. And we'll give you instructions on how you can submit that feedback either during this call or right after. And then we're going to be joined by some small business owners and one of our SBDC consultants to talk about those pivoting strategies that I mentioned at the beginning. Next slide. With that, I'm going to turn it over right away to Charlie Anderson from Senator Bennett's office and let you take it away.
All right, can you hear me? Awesome.
Yes, sounds great.
Well, thanks everyone for joining the call. Wanted to talk through a couple of things we've been working on, and as Erin said, get your feedback, and I hope you all will provide it, and we're incorporating it now as we develop the legislative text. So if we go to the next slide. The next slide. Great. So as you all know, I'm sure, you know, the Paycheck Protection Program has an 8-week covered period that starts at the origination of the loan. And, you know, we know PPP has been helpful to many businesses, but hasn't worked as well, especially for sort of some of the hardest hit businesses. So like sit-down restaurants or folks in the hospitality industry or others who've had their business, you know, mostly or completely shuttered during what is their 8-week period. And, you know, part of the issue here was there were limited funds, which caused a rush to apply. Businesses were unable to adjust the timing of their application to when they were prepared to sort of start to relaunch. And so they couldn't delay the start of the covered period, even if they were shuttered. We've heard that a lot from folks across Colorado and from a lot of the trade associations that represent a lot of small businesses. And so we came up with something. This is the first part. It's a 2-part proposal. And this is sort of the near-term fix. We worked with Senator Young from Indiana, so it's a bipartisan proposal. And it's very simple. It says for businesses that have fewer than 500 FTEs that have seen revenues decline by 25% or more, so have been substantially affected within that 8-week period, we would just extend the 8-week period both for deploying PPP funds and for receiving loan forgiveness to 16 weeks. So very simple, just double the amount of time that you have to spend the money. And so if you haven't been able to sort of rehire your staff or you know, get the sort of FTE count back up, you'd have twice as long to spend out the money and receive the full measure of loan forgiveness. I think that is responsive to sort of what folks have been seeing, especially again, for some of the hardest hit businesses like sit-down restaurants and hospitality that have had to be mostly or completely shuttered during this period. So that's their sort of short-term fix. And that tracks with sort of what we're seeing in Congress, which is there may be two sort of bills coming up. One will probably be an interim package, what people are referring to as COVID 3.75. So we had the CARES package was COVID 3. There was that interim bill that replenished the PPP and had some money for healthcare and for testing. That was COVID 3.5. There may be a 3.75 bill, sort of a stutter step before we go into negotiations over the 4th bill, the large package, which will be I'm hearing not before Memorial Day, probably in June. Next slide. So as mentioned, PPPs work well for some businesses, but we're hearing a lot from folks who should be receiving quite a bit of assistance and aren't able to. Often the smallest businesses without a strong banking relationship, minority-owned, women-owned, and rural businesses. Again, sometimes not having a long established banking relationship. They weren't able to get to the front of the line and the money ran out, or they've had difficulty and had to shop around with a bunch of lenders. And then the hardest hit businesses who saw, really, really sharp revenue declines. And some of the limitations that were in PPP that we're trying to address in the Restart program are, the 8-week duration, which I was just talking about, of the covered period, the limitation on the loan size of 2.5 times payroll, and the 25% cap on non-payroll loan forgiveness, which wasn't in this statute, but was imposed. And we're I know all of you all who are in the PPP program are awaiting the guidance from SBA and Treasury on sort of how the loan forgiveness will play out, but that is one piece that we've heard a lot about. So if we go to the next slide, we can tell you what we did about that. So we've worked with Senator Young again on the first major bipartisan program to support businesses in the months ahead, and we're calling this the Restart program. And so the eligibility again will be businesses who took a substantial revenue hit, so 25% over a certain period. So from immediately before the crisis to immediately after, and we have certain adjustments for seasonal businesses or for new businesses, but that's the basic idea. If you've taken a big revenue hit, up to 5,000 FTEs, but with enhanced forgiveness terms for businesses with fewer than 500 FTEs. I'll go into that a little bit in a second. The loan size would be 6 months worth of payroll, benefits, and fixed operating expenses, up to a lesser of 45% of 2019 receipts, or $10 million. So instead of 8 weeks, this is 26 weeks, and it's looking forward essentially for the second half of this year and saying you're allowed to sort of borrow against all of those expenses. And we thought that, one of the things that we wish had been, we understood and appreciate the need to get the money out quickly on the front end. So not have a whole bunch of rigmarole people have to go through. And just like under PPP, this would be 100% guaranteed, and there wouldn't be sort of a long underwriting process on the front end. But we did think that the loan forgiveness could be better targeted towards businesses that have really suffered revenue losses. And so the forgiveness will be based on revenue losses in 2020 relative to 2019. And you'll have a while between when 2020 ends and when you would have to sort of put those documents in and then receive the loan forgiveness as a result. And the remainder would turn into a loan that could be repaid over 7 years. So I know PPP had a term of 2 years, which a lot of folks have said that's not enough time if we have stuff to repay. And so we said, hey, look, like a lot of these businesses are going to be getting back up and running. They're going to be sort of having to dig out. And some of them are pretty low margin businesses, even when they're running at full throttle. And so let's give people a little bit more time to pay back the loan if there is a loan that remains. And the loan terms are basically 4% fixed rate for the first 2 years. You wouldn't have to pay any interest or principal in the first year, and interest only in the second year. And there'd be additional deferment if a business was economically distressed. After that, it would sort of be a floating interest rate and basically move with interest rates over time. So if the economy was stronger, the interest rate would be a little bit higher. If the economy is weaker, the interest rate would be a little lower. So we feel like this is kind of the next step, sort of what comes after PPP, and we feel like we need to show a longer term commitment that allows for businesses to get the money to get back up and running, and the confidence to do that borrowing, because if your revenues get back up and going, you'll be able to repay the loan, and if they don't, you'll get some loan forgiveness to help fill in that gap. And so, we just put this out this week. It's brand new. We're turning it into legislative text. And as mentioned, we'd love to have feedback. I believe the folks will be sharing the email, but it's startupco@colorado.edu. We're trying to turn this into text by the end of next week and get it out in the world, and then start pushing for it to be in that fourth package. So that's all I got. And I will turn it back over to Erin.
Thank you, Charlie. Your office has done a great job of reaching out for that feedback. So please be sure, if you haven't already, to submit that feedback. You can use the Q&A function on today's call, or you can email startupco@colorado.edu, the email address that's on your screen, in order to submit your feedback today.
Great.
So we're going to switch modes now onto our business panel. I am so excited to be joined by two entrepreneurs from Northwest Colorado. We all know that going into being a business owner is no easy journey on a normal day. And so it's only gotten more challenging over the past few weeks. So I'm really excited to get to hear these folks' stories. We're going to start off with Becca Kaufman, who is a business owner in Winter Park. So she joins us today from the side of I-70 somewhere, multitasking as business owners always have to do, and we're so grateful to have her. Next slide. Becca, we'll just have your businesses up on the screen so people can see your cool logos, and they'll also link to your website once we download the slides. But I want to start off by asking you just to tell us about these businesses. What are they and how long have you been in operation?
All right, so thanks for having me on the call today. The first one is Ullr's Tavern's, a late night music venue and bar located in Winter Park, Colorado, that opened in 2009. The Spot Grill is a food truck that operates inside of Ullr's, and it also does special events and catering. They started in 2013. He was the first food truck in Winter Park, so he got to write the language for food trucks in Winter Park. And then they joined forces with Ullr's in 2015. And the one in the middle there, that's Wake and Bacon. That is the newly formed business, and that is a breakfast and bakery spot in Winter Park, Colorado, actually upstairs from Ullr's Tavern.
Great. So what has your initial pivot been, and are your businesses still open? And if so, what capacity are you operating in right now?
The initial pivot for me, I have business partners in all of the businesses. The initial pivot for me was to try to become some kind of Leslie Knope, and try to be an accountant, a loan officer, a human resource director, a political advocate, just try to wear as many hats as possible. The learning curve was rough, but no one else is going to advocate for your business but yourself. So that was kind of the initial pivot for that. Wake and Bacon is open on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday currently, just for curbside pickup. The other two businesses are unfortunately closed right now. The bar and music venue, as well as the food truck. Sorry, one second. The Spot has been serving some food upstairs at Wake and Bacon to try to capture a little bit of revenue. Otherwise, we're currently in the works of creating a variance to try to send to the state by Tuesday, if the county commissioners approve it. That's been a little bit of a process, but the county's working pretty hard on that. And all the restaurants we created a restaurant group within the county to try to help create language that makes sense for that variance. But for the pivot, for the exciting part of the pivot, at least, for Wake and Bacon, we're looking into creating something of like a Blue Apron, or I forget what the other one's called, where you can bring fresh produce and healthy meals to your local community. But instead of it coming from one of these larger corporations, that can happen as a smaller corporation, or just as a restaurant within your town. You have access to better produce than, say, the grocery store. So just maybe a local idea of that, setting it up online, maybe even helping out people that come up to visit to use that resource, or so that people don't have to go to the grocery store, potentially cooking for families to keep people that are coming up to the mountains out of the grocery stores, to bring food to them that's already cooked so they can spend time on their bikes or playing outside instead of having to be cooking. For the bar, the plan currently is to come up with zones. So kind of like a Top Golf strategy, to where there's a karaoke zone, there's a pool table zone, a dartboard zone, where they could rent it out per hour and they'll have a cocktail waitress. that one's taking a bit longer since bars are still closed throughout the state. So we'll keep working on that.
Yeah, I think those are such creative ideas to get started though. And I particularly like that you mentioned the idea of local advocacy and working together with your town and county and other business owners to help develop these strategies instead of trying to go it alone. And I'm sure that made a big difference. Can you tell me a little bit about the current status for your employees? I imagine you have quite a few employees at each business. And so are they still working, or how have you approached that?
Unfortunately not. On March 16th, we had to fire all staff. Just the business owners are working at Wake and Bacon. They're W-2'd employees as well. So technically I have my 3 other partners that are working, but we had to fire all staff. We heavily looked into unemployment to help all of our employees get on unemployment and make sure they were able to do the paperwork, because the majority of people, I would say, throughout the country have never applied for unemployment. So that was kind of a pain and really just sad and depressing, but just part of this weird process that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that. That was something that we had talked about outside of this call, was that it's certainly not all sunshine and rainbows right now. There's been a lot of very difficult decisions that employers have had to make, but we're fortunate that right now those unemployment benefits are pretty expansive. And I know Dale, who's on the call with us today, has been helping a lot of employers as well through how to help people apply for unemployment, everyone working together to try to make that go more smoothly. So we'll come back to you, Becca, but I'm going to switch over to the next slide and introduce our other small business owner, Grant Smith. Grant is the owner of Riverwalk Theater and Edward Supply Company, which is a brand new operation, co-working space and coffee shop in Edwards, Colorado. So Grant, I'll start with the same question, if you're there, to just tell us about your businesses and how long you've been in operation.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Can you hear me okay?
We can, but we lost your video. I think you just have to switch it back on.
Let's see, start video.
So you can start talking and
I can't do more than one thing for sure.
there you are.
Okay. You good? All right, nice.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Yeah, real quickly, Grant Smith. I run and operate the Riverwalk Theater in Edwards, Colorado, which is in Eagle County. We are the Riverwalk Theater has been in existence and operation since 1997. My wife and I took over operation in April 2018, so we actually celebrated our 2-year anniversary during this time. So not exactly the same as the first year anniversary, but and then Edward Supply Company is a concept that was set to launch really on March 20th of this year. And the concept was and is, I guess, a coffee shop and co-working space. And they're separate but related. And so we have during this time actually launched the coffee shop portion of that business, and then the co-working space is where I office out of, and so it's not currently operating. And then we've kind of started also a pop-up barbecue concept that's now 3 weeks old, called Smokin' Jay's Barbecue, and it's like a Texas brisket concept. And so that's kind of related to both the movie theater and the coffee shop. So Edward Supply Company is currently serving coffee, smoothies. We do some pastries and things of that nature. And they're all kind of in one location, if you will, and leveraging kind of off of a patio that we installed I don't know, about a year ago. So we're doing service out of that window. Movies are not really operating, but we are doing some private shows. So. Is that how was that for an answer, Aaron?
That's good. You have a lot of,
Yeah, it's complex.
A lot of things in the fire right now. And the timing wasn't great with opening a new business. It's interesting to hear that Becca had that same thing of new businesses, obviously adds a challenge. So
Yeah.
tell us about your employee situation.
Yeah, so we kind of prior to this, we employed approximately, like we've let's call 4 full-time employees and then 10 plus or minus 10 part-time employees. We laid everybody off, and then since we shut down our operations on March 16th, and we were closed down for 4 weeks doing no operations. And then we came back online about 4 weeks afterwards, I guess. And we hired our theater manager is a guy who's been here for 10 years and is vital to our operations. He's back. And then we've slowly started adding employees back. So we've had a couple part-time people come back. And then next week we'll end up adding 2 of our more full-time employees back, and they'll be coming back part-time. And their job is really it's interesting because their job has changed. Their job is totally changed in a lot of different ways because we won't be operating a theater until at least July. So to answer your question, we're starting to hire people back in different capacities.
Mm-hmm. And how has the response so far gone? I've seen on your social media you're selling a lot of brisket from that smoker you set up. The patio seems busy often. So how would you say your strategy has gone of serving people at that walk-up window?
It's well, I mean, I think the realistic thing that needs to be said is it's not the same, right? It's just not. But generally speaking, we've pivoted our business, and the new business and businesses are succeeding, and so it's great. I mean, we've done brisket, we've done the brisket concept 12 days. We've sold out a product 10 of those 12 days, and it seems to only be growing in revenue. And just we're getting repeat customers. We have, and Aaron, this, I guess, because you're my neighbor. I mean, that patio, we really haven't done anything different. It's just, we're just kind of able in a way to, with our core business shut down, people are just looking at our space differently, which is something that we've been trying to do for a very long time. And so, we're just kind of utilizing that space now, and we're selling soft serve. We've sold more soft serve cones in the last 2 weeks than we have in the past 6 months, which is kind of crazy. So, to answer your question, I think it's succeeding. It's a lot of work though. I mean, it's constant hustle and constant. It's constant work. So there's nothing out some of our stuff was I don't want to say on autopilot, but we're constantly training new employees. We're constantly having to basically say, hey, listen, this is what you used to do. And now, and in some ways it's really helped formalize some of the transition that we were undergoing slowly. It's kind of helped speed these things along in a lot of ways for us, which is great,
Yeah, people still know you as a movie theater. It's a cool old-timey movie theater with a cool kind of old-fashioned looking marquee. But I think they're reaching out to support you because they want their movie theater to make it through. Right. But now they're seeing all of these other benefits that you had added into the business beyond just being a movie theater. And so it's engaging them in that. That's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back and I'm going to turn it over to Dale really quickly just to talk about some other pivot strategies. So next slide, please. And So Dale's a SBDC consultant with us. He's been working with dozens of business owners on these pivot strategies, plus has a background with it as a part of himself being an entrepreneur, as well as teaching the subject of entrepreneurship. So I wanted to bring Dale into the conversation since he's working with people through this strategy. And so Dale, I want to start by acknowledging that, as Grant kind of just acknowledged, and Becca too, businesses might be looking at these options for pivoting and might be concerned that they aren't going to be revenue generators. There may be going to be a break-even solution at best. So why, from your perspective, might they be worth considering anyway?
Well, I think it's interesting. One of the things, back at school when I was teaching, we are entrepreneurship and small business. And a lot of times kids, first day question would be, what's the difference between being a small business owner and an entrepreneur? And sometimes you'd get into these long-winded things. Entrepreneurs are always looking to try to figure out new business models. And the way you try to do that is you iterate and test in small chunks. So I think one of the values of reconceptualizing in both the cases that we just heard about is we both have spaces. What else could that space be used for? Well, this is a good chance to try to iterate and get some baby steps taking forward before, unfortunately, and again, it's kind of like the lemonade of the lemons, is we don't have a high volume. So this is a good time to try to test things out. So that's one of the things I would say is a value. The second part, and I'll put my former CPA hat on, even marginal revenue right now might be the difference between making it between, I'm going to start my video. Sorry about that. There I am. So marginal revenue might be the difference between making it to 4th of July. It might be the difference making it to Labor Day, and it might make the difference between bridging the gap between Labor Day and the start of ski season. So they are pennies. No one would argue that you're not going to be getting pennies as opposed to dollars, but those pennies might add up enough. And again, we heard Senator Bennett's proposal. So there may be other help along the way that, again, with these little bit of new revenue streams, make survival capable. And then long term, it is testing out these new business models in a way that hopefully will predict sustainability in 2021.
So what metrics are you encouraging business owners to keep an eye on as they are kind of experimenting with these new strategies?
Yeah, one of the things I have learned from my own businesses that I've started and run is that almost all of us have heuristics that we utilize every day to know if things are good, bad, or indifferent. In my case, my first business, I sold computer systems to law firms, and I knew for every 3 proposals I had outstanding, one of them usually would result in business. So if I looked at my pipeline, and the pipeline was relatively full, I was relatively confident I'd be able to make payroll, et cetera. And so one of the challenges of being a small business owner is we don't often have a lot of time to rethink out what those heuristics are. And this is, again, a good opportunity to start to look at what kind of, some people call them key performance indicators, KPIs. Some people call it a dashboard. However you want to phrase it, it's coming up with different things that make sense to you. So obviously revenue is the end game, but there are a lot of predictors of what revenue might be. So in general terms, it might be something like how many people are coming back in line for the curbside. Are you getting repeat customers? We all know we're going to have a smaller volume. Can we get more per customer? Can we add on upsell packages, those type of things, and are they working? How many people, if it's an online, are we retaining? I think in general, a very good benchmark right now is my online presence. How good is my social media working? What kind of pipeline am I getting? Where are people falling off? They share, but they don't buy. What's causing that to happen? So how much is it costing me to acquire these customers online? Can online also be an advantage to bringing people into my establishment? Whether it's a Square Reader, touchless checkout, faster pay. So, the consumer experience you want to promote is not standing in line to pay for the meal or standing in line paying for the retail. It's the actual shopping or dining experience. So can we figure out ways to make that faster? Then in each of our industries, we're going to have fewer tables in a restaurant. Can we churn those tables faster in a way that still makes people comfortable, where you're not hovering over them to try to get people to leave early? In retail, it's sales per square foot. Can we be creative with how we get more sales per square foot? For example, one of the clients here in Winter Park has a touristy place with those little rocks, and the kids just love to go through the little rocks and put them in a bag and take them out. So she's going to pre-package the bags and say, okay, here it is. You move on. Don't dawdle. And maybe have more, kind of like at the grocery store, at the point of checkout, more impulse buying kinds of things. So those would be some of the metrics, I think. Again, what you're trying to do is come up with the metrics that predict what the eventual revenues are going to be as a forward indicator. So again, as the juice gets turned up, hopefully in the next few weeks, months, then that's when the revenue will be coming in.
Yeah, great ideas. I'm glad you mentioned social media and the kind of online platforms. And I'd like to go back to Grant first and then to Becca. But Grant, can you tell us about your online presence? You mentioned online ordering. So was that something you had to put into place? And then in general, how are you managing your online presence and your social media strategy?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. Real quickly, my online social media is run by someone else, a girl who's, I guess, technically actually an employee, but acquaintance of mine. I think she does a fantastic job. And she's since I guess I'm technically her first client, but she's gone on to start her own kind of social media company, and Native Creative is her business. So if anybody needs some help, she does a great job. So, but she and I collaborate, but I definitely try to farm that out. It's not I'm not a tech person. So I pay someone who I think to do that. And she and I work on a lot of our graphic design stuff. And I think they're very hand in hand. I think they really are telling our story. And we're really kind of in the space business of really defining space, and we want our space to feel. So we want those things all in line. So that's kind of my social media kind of feel our story kind of thing, as I work with a girl named Kinsey, and we have a great relationship, and I think she does a great job. In terms of pivoting or changing our online sales mechanism, we did have to basically, on the fly, come up with a way to sell our products online. It was a relatively painless thing, but it definitely is some work to get it set up, and then to educate customers on how to do it, and then get a little bit of feedback and then tweak it. So you didn't. For me, I didn't want to spend so much time on the front end. I just needed to get it up, get it running, and then I would kind of figure it out on the fly. But that's just kind of how I operate, is kind of on the fly. Luckily, we had invested in when we bought our POS system. We operate two separate POS systems, one for the movie theater and then one for F&B. And so we had always had plans to grow our F&B. So I totally overinvested in my POS system for my F&B, a year ago. But it's the top, it's a really great POS system. And so it was super easy to transition that and to get it rolling. We had a mobile handheld device so we could utilize at a different location. So I think getting the customer education has kind of been the hardest part to really, because we really want to push people to buy online. It makes our process easier. It makes everything easier for the customer, for us. And so we're really trying to push it. And from a safety standpoint, I mean, we're really trying to our best, and that's been a challenge for us, to be as touchless as possible. We really want to make sure we're a clean environment, we are a safe place to be. And it's weird because as much as we wanted to push the online sales, it's like I can feel it. Like some people, they literally want to give you cash. They want to have they want to have an interaction at the register. And it's really a bizarre place to be in where like, because I get it. I'm a total extrovert. I love talking to people and I love that part of our business. And I'm like, man, can you just go online and buy it instead of giving me $20? And it's a really weird feeling as a business owner to not take cash. It's a really, I have a hard time with it. I think back about like I have a finance professor that he just said, if you're walking down the street, you find $1, reach down and pick it up. And that's what I feel like with cash. It's like, it's kind of crazy to keep pushing people to online, but it's really the right call long-term, I think.
Yeah. And I think you said something key, which is that you recognized that social media or knowing how to manage that online presence wasn't your strength. So you farmed that out pretty early on. And that has been key to that education, that customer education as well, is like, we're open, buy online, support us online, buy tickets in advance. You're doing some ticket promotions for people who buy movie tickets now. All of that, I think, is a good strategy for engaging with your customers, especially because you know that people are spending a whole lot more time on social media and on their computers right now. And so you're reaching your customer where they're at. They're not out and about walking around. They're probably not picking up a physical copy of a newspaper. So finding them online is smart, and something other business owners probably want to think about, that some of these people who have really great presence online, they're not doing it themselves. They're engaging somebody to help, and you can find those entry-level people like you did who just want to have a resume builder. And so it doesn't have to be a very expensive investment. So thank you, Grant. Becca, I'm going to turn it over to you really quick just to see how you've managed that piece of online presence and if you've been able to make the switch to online selling.
Right. So real quick, I'll let you know. So for the beginning stuff for Wake and Bacon, what really worked for us was just little cutesy videos. Jib Jab has been an amazing resource for us as well. Just to let people know, hey, we're back open. We're only open on the weekends, but just doing cute videos with our owners that are kind of funny, since we're only going towards our local market currently. For Uhler's Tavern, it's been putting live shows up from bands, live streaming shows that when they've played at the venue before. For the future, for potentially doing the Hello Fresh or Blue Apron locally, that is going to be that more of building a full new website, as well as potentially, if the Top Golf strategy can work for the different zones in the venue, that'll also have to be an online reservation system, whereas you don't want people just standing at the door. So that's kind of currently our online marketing stuff. Luckily, my talent buyer's girlfriend is kind of a wizard with all tech things, and she's been the one that's really been helping me with that.
Great. It takes a family, it takes a community. So it's great to engage all those other people. I'm going to bring Dale back on the line to share any closing thoughts of what we've missed in terms of pivot strategy. And Dale has a list that he's put together of some of these software programs or platforms that might be helpful to business owners. So we'll make sure that we post that on the Northwest SBDC website and include it in a follow-up email. But Dale, what else would you add?
Yeah, real quick on that one. So what's happening is kind of like Senator Bennett's proposal. A lot of the companies immediately rushed in to give you a 30-day free trial. They're extending those things out. So we'll put together a nice little chart for you to say, whether it's even something like Adobe, which if you've ever tried to create a PDF file from a Word document and not been all that happy with it, now Adobe's making a lot of their upper end things, including some of their After Effects and packages free or at a very reduced cost. So I kind of look at it, it's like this is the cleaning out the basement or the attic kind of time too. Probably the best things to be pivoting to are the things that you knew in the back of your mind we needed to get to. We haven't done content management in forever. Some of our clients that I've been working with, the last post was in 2018. So you've known in the back of your head, but you've been busy running your business on a day-to-day basis. And again, for the last couple of years, things have been kind of going up. So time hasn't been there. So the best things to put your time into are the ones that you already intuitively knew you should have been making an investment in. I liked Grant's thing about point of sale. We have a couple of clients who've already invested in some aspect of software technology, but are only using the tiny tip of the iceberg of it. One hairstylist in Eagle County found out that her reservation system also has a billing module to it, a Zoom feature, so she can actually show customers at home how to do various things. So QuickBooks also has some of your legacy software systems. So one of the things we're also going to try to put together is a series of checklists that you can go through to say, this is what I've got. Am I getting all of it that I can out of it? And this is what I need to complement what I've got to get even more juice going. So we'll try to have a series coming up of toolbox kinds of things that you can do where you listen to what we're saying on these kind of webinars and then can actually implement them that afternoon or talk to one of our consultants and help you get implementing right away into these new pivot points.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Dale. Thank you to all of our panelists. Definitely, as we're all thinking about what to do now that the weather has gotten so nice and we can't go on our typical like beach vacations or maybe desert vacations like we do this time of year, we can still take little road trips around our own region and go on a day trip to Winter Park or come over to Edwards or go down to the state park in Rifle. You know, take advantage of seeing these places that you maybe haven't ever gotten off I-70 to see and visiting some of these small businesses that are trying actively to engage in some of these pivot strategies, and you might get some ideas for your own business as well. So thank you so much. Dale also, he's a consultant with us, the Northwest SBDC. As I said, he's been working with dozens of clients and I keep giving him more, and he is happy to work with other businesses as well. And we have a whole team of fantastic consultants who can help you talk through some of these ideas. Please reach out to schedule an appointment with us. It's free if you're interested. Next slide. So a reminder that we have a lot of great business resources as well as today's presentation, which will be available at our website, northwestsbdc.org. You can also find business planning tools and other resources that would help you there. A great compilation of resources available at the Office of Economic Development and International Trade's website, which is choosecolorado.com. And finally, more resources available for both entrepreneurs and startup communities that is available at Startup Colorado's website, startupcolorado.org. Next slide. We are doing these calls every Friday, and each region has a slightly different focus. You can watch any of them or tune into any of them after the fact on the Choose Colorado YouTube site. It might be interesting just to tune in and hear some different suggestions from business owners this week, since we're all talking to local business owners. You might pick up some other tips on those other regional calls. Next slide. I think finally, we're going to just give a shout out to a somewhat new resource that's available, which is the Startup Colorado podcast. I've been listening to them because they're fantastic, about 5 to 10 minute episodes with small business owners predominantly talking about the ways that they're pivoting their business. The last episode actually focused on Eagle County's reopening strategy and had, like, my takeaway was everybody who asked me questions about reopening, I'm just going to send them to this podcast because it summarized it so much better than I'm ever able to. So a great thing to tune in and get some tidbits. On next week's call, again, those regional calls each have a slightly different focus. So on the Southwest call, which will be at noon, they're going to be talking with some attorneys to talk about the legal considerations for lease contracts. And so if that's something that you're struggling with or wondering about, you might want to tune into that call at noon or check the recording afterwards. On our Northwest call next week, we're going to be focusing on the topic of farmers markets. We know people are getting ready for those. So we'll be talking about the ag producer side of things, as well as kind of, the vendor or the general farmers market plan. Still working out details, but you can watch our website as well as the Startup Colorado website to get the specifics when they're available, and certainly tune in next week. I think that's our last slide, so we'll wrap up here. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.